Welcome to Amazing Indiana Music Stories.
Born and raised in Indiana, born in Shelbyville, Indiana, and then moved in the fifth grade to Brownsburg, Indiana. And my dad worked at Allison's division of General Motors. So Brownsburg was what they call a bedroom community for Indianapolis. And all of the workers that lived there had jobs in Indianapolis. So.
Any musical influences as a child? Parents played or sang?
No,
or aunts and uncles?
Neither one of my parents really played a musical instrument or sang. I think they loved to listen to music. They would go out to dances and things like that. But I don't think they ever really had any musical.
Did they
bent.
play music in the home other than the radio? Did they play records?
No, they didn't really. Other than just listening to music.
So, like most people, you just all of a sudden discovered the Beatles and everything changed?
Well, actually, it's kind of a funny story because when I was in my sophomore year at high school, I went to a dance, typical sock hop of the 60s, and right in the middle of the sock hop, they introduced the band that had come to entertain. As a matter of fact, it was Keetie and the Kats. Keith Phillips, who I know now, have met him, and I told him this story and he laughed a lot. But when the band came on stage, all the girls in the auditorium ran toward the stage. And I'm standing in the back of the room going, wait a minute, something's going on here. And I figured out that if I wanted to get that kind of attention, I needed to play guitar. So I went home and told my mom and dad.
So what year would that have been?
That would have been, probably, I would say 61. Yeah, 61. And so I said, Mom, I want to take guitar lessons. And she said, whatever for? And I said, I just want to take guitar lessons. I was too embarrassed to tell her exactly why, but so they signed me up with guitar lessons at Harlan Brothers on Illinois Street in Indianapolis. And I went there and took lessons. And I didn't know about, which is kind of funny, I didn't know about Arthur's Music Store back then. And but I went to Harlan Brothers and they gave me we rented a very inexpensive guitar. It had cowboys on it, I think, on the front to play an acoustic guitar. And I practiced with that for, many, many months. And then I talked my dad and I said, look, this guitar I have is not really very good. I said, I can't really make some of the chords they're asking me to make on it. So I said, I really need to get something better. And I'd like to have an electric guitar.
Well, yeah, play in a band.
Oh, yeah. So I could, that was always in the back of my mind. But so we went to Sears, of course, and I got a Silvertone guitar and Silvertone amplifier and brought it home, and I was great, at that point. I thought, boy, this is really nice. So I started playing and was able to do some of the things that the teacher was asking me to do because I could actually press down the strings then. And so I worked with that Silvertone guitar, and I started getting an interest in recording at about that same time because I wanted to be able to play a background track and then play along with myself, to play lead along with myself. So I asked them for a tape recorder, and they said, okay. So they went to Sears and got me a Silvertone tape recorder. It was a stereo playback, but only mono record. And they didn't know the distinction. They didn't understand the distinction. But I was able to use that then to do what I wanted to do, which was record backing tracks and then play along with it. So that got me quite a ways.
So we're mid-60s now.
Yeah, that was mid-60s, yeah. And, it was early 60s, actually, about 1960. So I did that for a while, and then I can't remember exactly how I found out there was an audition for a guitar player. they needed a rhythm guitar player for this new group they were forming called the Blue Angels. And so I went to this little house in Speedway that was owned by Lil and Bus Bowles. And they were the booking agency for Jim Shelton at WIBC. So whenever Jim needed a band to take along to these sock hops all over Indiana, where he would play records and the band would play, and normally what would happen is the band would play for 45 minutes, and then Jim would come in and do his record thing, playing records for 15 minutes until the band came back on. And so I went and auditioned, and they said, "Yeah, you're great. We're gonna take you." So I'm going, "Wow, I'm in a band." I had never been in a band. I had no idea, what that meant. So we started into the band, and I ended up going with them all over the state, and playing these different gigs for different high schools. We'd go into a gymnasium and set up and play, and it was really a tremendous amount of fun. Probably the most fun I've had, in my life.
Yeah.
Because I signed my first autograph at one of those shows.
I know the
and
feeling.
and I still remember it to this day. Red-haired girl named Juanita, so. But it was just tremendous. I just really enjoyed it tremendously.
So what comes next then?
Well,
we played in some bands.
Yeah, we played in some
other
bands. We played in some band. Played in after one of the things that we found out about. One of the reasons why I kind of wanted to move on was I was getting ready to go to college, and this was in my senior year, and we had been getting, unknown to us, the Mr. and Mrs. Bowles were taking most of the money, and the band members were getting like $7 a night for a gig, and Shelton would be paying them, the Bowles, $250, $300, for the band, and they would pay us basically gas money, and then they would take the rest. And we didn't care. We were, stupid young kids. We just wanted to play, So that's basically what happened. And then when I was getting ready to go to college, they needed another guitar player, so they auditioned a couple people, and one of them was Greg Galbraith. And Greg was a terrific guitar player, much better than me, probably much better than the actual lead guitar player we had at the time. And he came in and just blew everybody away. So I figured, okay, they're in good shape. I can leave and go on to college. Well, Greg ended up going down to Nashville and becoming a studio musician. So he was a tremendous player.
And so in college is when you got more interested in broadcast?
Yes, exactly. When I was in the IU, the first year at IU, I kept hearing on the radio this radio station. I didn't know where it was coming from, but it was WQAD. I was living in Wright Quadrangle, and WQAD was the Wright Quadrangle radio station. It was what they call a carrier current station. What that means is they plugged the transmitter into the electrical
and you could get it
circuit, and you could get it right in an induction
Yep.
loop in the building. Now you could also get it about 50 feet outside the building, but not much further than that. So anyway, I was going. I decided that, that I want to find out about this radio station thing because that kind of sounds cool. So I went down to the place where they were actually doing it, and it was literally in a closet. Was where the audio console was, and so I went in there and I said, "Hey, I'm kind of interested in this. I'd like to, be on the radio, be a DJ, play records." So the guy says, the DJ that was there at the time said, "Well, that's great. Listen, why don't you sit down?" And he said, "You can take over for me. I got to go to the bathroom anyway." So he left the room, and here I am. He said, "This is how you turn on the mic. This is how you turn it off. This is how you start the record." And that was my induction into being a radio DJ. So I started doing that, and it turned into be just a tremendous, again, another really great part of my life. I was doing radio shows in the afternoon, what we would now call drive time. And I had a great time doing that.
And at the same time, and you discovered that there's a whole world of television as well.
Right, exactly. I went to one of the buildings on the IU campus is the Fine Arts and Radio and Television building. And the initials were FART, which everybody said, I'm going over to the building. So one day I was in there, and because I'd had tape recorders along the way, I was very familiar with different types of tape recorders, and there was a senior in there doing his senior project in radio and television. And he was struggling trying to put a tape on an Ampex tape machine. And even though I had never actually seen an Ampex tape machine before,
It's the same.
they're all the same. Tape comes in, goes around a guide, goes over the head, goes around another guide, comes out and gets rolled onto the... So he said, can you help me with this, And I said, well, yeah. So I took the tape, did this, just like I'd done it 1,000 times. And he said, yeah, that's great. How'd you do that, And he was looking at it, and I said, well, it's just like this. And so that was my first introduction to the radio and television program at IU. And I thought to myself, gee, if he's gotten to this point where he's a senior and he doesn't know how to thread a tape machine, what did he miss, during this 4 years of his education? And universities are great. They'll give you a background in the whys and wherefores of doing something. But practical knowledge really will take you a long, long way. Mm-hmm. And that's what I found out that day.
So you graduated. Did you pursue the radio and TV?
I pursued the radio and television degree. I did not graduate, though, because I did my first year at IU in Bloomington. Then I came up to IU Extension, which was later called IUPUI, but it was IU Extension at the time. This was in 63, 64. And I started taking classes, and I was working at Western Auto Store on Washington Street, and I would take classes at night. So when I was going to IU Extension, I was working at the Western Auto Store on Washington Street. And during my lunch hours, I would go down the street to Arthur's Music Store, because previously I knew about Arthur's by that point, because I'd bought a guitar there and an amplifier there that I used in the Blue Angels band. And I would go down there every lunch hour and just go in and play around guitars and do different things. And one day I was in there when a mother and her son were in there, and they were trying to make a decision about what kind of guitar to get him. And the salesman, Fred Brown, had come over, and he'd talk to them, and they finally got to the point where they couldn't make a decision, really. So Fred said, well, I'll tell you what, I'll just go over here and leave you alone. You two can talk about it and decide what you want to do. So I was standing over to the side, and I heard all this conversation that had gone on. So I walked over to the mom, and I said, well, I think really that he needs this guitar, because this will be a better guitar. It's been my experience that the easier it is to play the guitar, the longer the person will stay with it. I said, as far as the amplifier goes, he can get a smaller amplifier to begin with, and then as he gets better and joins a group, maybe, he can get to a larger amplifier. And she said, oh, gee, that makes a lot of sense. Okay, that's great. We'll take these two then that you recommended. Do we give you the money? And I said, no, you probably shouldn't. I said, because I don't really work here. I said, you could probably give them to Mrs. Arthur over at the counter, who had been standing there watching this exchange. And so the lady goes over and gives her the money, and I go back to, playing around with guitars. And I'm playing around, and all of a sudden Mrs. Arthur says, come here a minute. And I said, yeah. And she said, would you like to have a job here? And I said, you mean being around guitars all the time? So.
Which Mrs. Arthur was this?
Yeah, this was Leola Arthur, who was Amos Arthur's wife
right.
at the time, yeah. Yeah, this was long before I'd ever met Linda, their daughter. And so I started working there, and then they said, listen, we need another person. Do you know of anybody else? I said, well, my friend Denny Smerdell, was the lead guitar player in the Blue Angels. I said, I think he's looking for work. So he's going to school, at the same time, and he needs, something. So they said, well, bring him in. So he came in. Denny was always electronically inclined, so he ended up working in the basement on amplifiers. Service department. And I ended up on the sales floor, obviously, selling things because I could talk to people.
Very cool. So at what point did you get interested in having your own recording set up?
Well, during that time when after I started working for Arthur's, I had the idea that, and I'd had recorders all along, different audio recorders, and I went by Graham Electronics, which used to be located in Glendale. Mm-hmm. And in the window, they had a little display window outside the east side entrance to the mall, and they had a little display window there, and they had a Crown SX 800 sitting there in the window. I saw that, and it was love at first sight. Mm-hmm. I said, oh man, I gotta have that. So I went in and talked to him about it, and I ended up putting it in the layaway because I couldn't afford it, right then. So I paid on it for about...
Do you remember what that went for in that year?
I want to say about $750, which was a
lot of money.
A lot of money to me. So I ended up paying on it for about 6 or 7 months and finally got it. So now I have this professional recorder, And so I said, wow, gee, I need to open a recording studio now that I have this. So I found a space on South Illinois Street, and it was just a storefront. But it had been a recording studio, believe it or not.
South Illinois?
Yeah, South Illinois Street.
Remember what it was? Was that Jan Eden?
No. No, Jan was on North Meridian.
Okay.
At that time. And but they wanted $25 to rent this a month, to rent this place out, because it was not, unimproved, let's put it that way. And so I went in, and the old recording studio had burlap on the walls with insulation behind it. Uh-huh. So I didn't really have to do much in the way of acoustical treatment. So I put the recorder over there, and I bought from the music store a used Bogan MXM mixer, which is a PA mixer, a 5-channel PA mixer with 1-channel output. And then I bought a couple Radio Shack stereo passive mixers that they had. So I bought those, and that was my console, quote unquote, that I used.
One for in and one for monitoring.
Exactly. And so I started
what were the speakers?
Speakers, I had Wharfdale speakers.
Oh, good.
Yeah, Wharfdale speakers, and I'd had those since I was about 16 years old because I really loved the sound of Wharfdale speakers. I was kind of a hi-fi guy back, when I was 16, 17, before I actually got into the band. And so I had Wharfdale speakers, very nice speakers, and used those. And we had a couple groups come in that...
I was going to ask you, what was your first session?
Well, the first one was for a guy, and I can't remember his name, but the name of the group was The Herd, H-E-R-D.
I've heard of this band.
Yeah.
Somebody that I interviewed or talked to or read about recently was in that band.
Was in that band?
Yeah,
really?
Yeah,
oh, wow.
The Herd. If I think long enough, I'll remember.
Remember the guy's name. Okay, well, I'd appreciate it because I'd like to touch base with him again. But so we recorded that. It was mostly demo recordings. We didn't know much about how to make records at that time. Where do you get, we always figured that to actually press a record, it was going to be very expensive. So there was no reason for us to really pursue that. And then I did a couple other recordings for country artists. And one of the people that worked at Arthur's Music Store at the time was a fellow by the name of Kenny Sy. And Kenny Sy was a real promoter. he was a guy that he had his own company called Stage Door Productions. And he came to me one day and he said, "Hey, I hear you've got a recording studio." I said, "Yeah, as a matter of fact, I do." He says, "Well, I've got an artist here that I would like to have recorded." And I said, "Okay, we'll bring him on down." So they came down and we made 2 sides, did 2 recordings. I think we did about 5 or 6 takes on each side. It was 45 that he wanted to do. So he took the tape, and I didn't think a whole lot about it. He took it out and had it pressed and brought it back, and I've got it someplace, but I didn't bring it with me because I don't know where it is. But it turned out to be pretty bad. I mean, the recording quality was not great, but it didn't make any difference to Kenny because all he wanted was to be able to impress his client that he got him recorded. You know.
And they could sell them at sock hops.
And they could sell them at sock hops, you know, and the kids didn't care. So I did that for about a year or so. And I had been at Arthur's and had been waiting on a couple of people who worked at Channel 4 because it's on the south side. The 3490 Bluff Road is where Channel 4 was located, their studio was located. And every once in a while we'd get one of the directors who would come in and I would sell them a guitar, you know, and I would talk to them about, you know, gee, what's it like to work at, you know, Channel 4? And finally one of them said, you know, we've got an opening for a cameraman. Why don't you come over and check it out? So I said, okay, I'll do that. So I did, and went in and sat down and talked to Elmer Snow, who was the general manager. And I told him, I said, I would really love to do this. I said, I know some about photography. I know about lenses and things like that because I'd been an amateur photographer for years. And he said, well, okay. He said, I tell you what, we have people here who are graduates of the RCA broadcast school in New Jersey. Said they can tell you everything you need to know, you know, and we're going to put you on the camera crew. You start as a cameraman. And so 2 weeks later, I walked into the studio at Channel 4, had no idea which end of the camera to point toward the talent. And I started getting instruction then from these guys that worked at the studio that were graduates of the RCA broadcast school.
Big old cameras.
Big old cameras. Big old, what they call image orthicon cameras. And they had a 1-inch, a 3-inch target, which about this big. So, and they were tubes.
Right.
So everything was tubes back in those days. And one of the things that they would do when the tubes start getting old, the image starts to, burn in to the tube. So one of the things they would do was they found out they could take the tubes out of the camera, put them in a freezer for a month, take them back out, and that kind of refreshes them for a while.
I'll be darned.
So
it's a degaussing by temperature.
Yeah, exactly. So we would go in and open up the refrigerator to get our lunch out, and there'd be a tube in the freezer. But the Channel 4, they called it Indiana's broadcast school, because really, if you could go in there with absolutely no knowledge of anything.
Good place to start.
And, it was a perfect place to start. And so I started there, and after about 2 weeks of having these guys say, okay, well, this is how you do this, and, this is how you make the pedestal go up and down, and how you, point the camera and zoom in and out, and, this is how you make a shot. And I'm saying, okay, fine, and I'm, really absorbing all this stuff because I really want to know about it. And after about 2 weeks, I walk in one morning, and there's nobody there. And so I go to the production manager, and I say, where is everybody? And he says, oh, they all quit last night in a salary dispute. He said, you're the new crew chief. Been there 2 weeks.
We want you to hire some people.
Exactly. He says, you're going to hire people, and we're going to restaff the crew. So that's what I did. So I hired a whole group of new people. Some of them had some experience working at other stations from around the country. Some of them had no experience. And so I gave them the benefit of my 2 weeks of knowledge. And we ended up, producing programs.
So we're probably just about up to a basement recording studio.
Well, all at the same time. This was prior to 1970, okay? All of this. So I left the music store in 1966, joined Channel 4 in November of 1966, and worked there for several years, for a couple of years, 3 years. And then the program manager at WTTV, a fellow by the name of Howard Zuckerman, decided to start his own company called National Teleproductions. And National Teleproductions was pretty much what the name sounds like. We would travel all over the country doing sports pickups for the national networks. So Howard took me and one engineer from Channel 4. And then he brought in other people that he knew in the industry from all over. Our chief engineer was from KSL in Salt Lake City. And we had another fellow that was the production manager from Ohio University at Athens. And all of these people came together, and there were 11 of us total that started National Teleproductions. And I got into a situation where I was able to produce and direct pilots for, in one case, a nationally syndicated program called Scene 70. And I got to talk to Phil Spector on the phone one day because I was trying to get him right. I was trying to get him to let us, video one of his groups, and it was quite interesting because we had this program, Scene 70, was nationally syndicated, 156 markets, so we had some money to spend. We weren't asking these folks to do it for free. We had some money to spend, and so I called the number for Phil Spector Operations, and this secretary answered, and I said, "Hi, I'd like to speak to Phil about this group." And she said, "Well, he's not available." And I said, "Okay, well, it's too bad because, I have $10,000 to, book a group." And she said, "Hold on." And about 2 seconds later, I'm on the phone with Phil Spector. So we talked for a little while, and we couldn't really come to an agreement because he wanted a lot more than $10,000 for this particular group. But we ended up having Billy Joe Royal. We had Dionne Warwick, some really top name acts on this show called Scene 70.
And how was that distributed across the city?
156 markets. What they did was the syndicator was Jack Moss Productions in New York City, and we would produce these programs, and then he would produce copies of it was on 2-inch videotape back in those days, and he would produce 12 copies, and what they would do is they would bicycle the tapes around to the different independent television stations that showed this, because most of the time the stations that we were on were the independent stations that didn't have a network affiliation but needed to fill the time with relevant programming. And of course they loved the idea of having a teen-oriented show. So we got, like I said, 156 markets to put this show into.
Let's move forward to the studio in the basement.
Okay.
And the records behind you.
Right. So this was starting in 1970. My wife and I got married. I had actually, at that point, National Teleproductions was starting to go kind of downhill. So I moved. My father-in-law, after I got married, father-in-law made me an offer I couldn't refuse. So I started working at the music store again. So now I'm coming back to the same place I left, to go into the broadcasting.
Amos was your father-in-law?
Amos was my father-in-law.
Now it's
right.
making sense now.
Now it's making sense. So now I'm back at the music store, and during this time, I was still always interested in recording. I still had my trusty Crown recorder, but I didn't really have any place to put it. Didn't have a studio. I didn't want to rent, because that didn't really turn out very well. And so we got married, and we said, okay, well, we need to look for a house. We need to get a house. So I said, okay, we can get a house as long as it has a basement. I said, because I want to put my recording studio in that basement. So we looked at several different houses and finally came across one that had a large basement that was partially finished on one side, and the furnace and everything was on the other side, separated by a block wall. So I looked at it. I'm saying, boy, this is going to be perfect. I'm looking at this in my mind, saying, well, I can put the studio wall here and the glass, and so I can look through to the musicians. So I said, yeah, this is the one. So the decision to buy the house, from my end at least, was based on the basement.
Where was that house?
That was on 65th Street.
And 65th and...
65th and Allisonville Road.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Rick lives right by there now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so once I had the place, then I said, okay, now I need to, start building this out. So I started with, made a couple mistakes in doing that, because I took 2x2s and put them into on the brick wall, on the block wall, and I used one of the stud attachment units to attach the studs to the wall. And unfortunately what that did was penetrate the block and cause the seal to be broken, so that anytime we had rain, we had water on the floor. So that wasn't such a good deal. But anyway, I figured that out pretty quickly, but we got that taken care of. And so for a long time, in the first studios, all we had was just craft paper facing out into the studio and insulation in between 2x4s all the way around the perimeter of the studio. And then I built a wall in between the two, got a couple pieces of glass, put them in there, so I could see into the studio. And then I started setting up tables, just 8-foot, banquet tables. And I put all the stuff on that, and then ran cables, cut a hole in the wall, ran cables out through the wall, and to microphones and microphone stands in the studio, and started doing recordings. And anybody.
Well, now you're working at a music store, so you got a whole demographic of people interested in recording.
Exactly. Every time somebody came in, I said, "Hey, do you need a recording?" And that worked out really well. So I ended up getting a whole lot of people. A lot of them are displayed back here, and we ended up doing in the 70s. We ended up doing, probably 30 or 40 different groups, 30 or 40 LPs that we made of different groups.
And some of them are on your label.
Yes, exactly. Some of them are on the ORS label, Osborne Recording Studio label. And it was great. It was a lot of fun. We met a lot of musicians, and we recorded a lot of good music.
Oh, yeah, you got to take the good with the bad, the bad with the good. And a couple of those LPs are pretty valuable now.
Well, as it turns out, especially in the 70s, there was, over in Europe, there were a lot of people who were very interested in the psychedelic, rock and roll music of the United States. So when these albums, some of these albums got over to Europe. And when they got over to Europe, they took off. They couldn't, sell them. They were using them for promotional materials for the bands here, and were selling them at the, places they played. So it wasn't really a big deal here. But when they got over there, of course, they thought these were all major groups, in Europe. And I would get phone calls in the middle of the night.
Right.
From some German accented voice asking me if I, was the person that recorded Good Cheer or McKay, and I would say, yes, this is the recording studio. And he would say, do you have any left? And I said, well, no, I don't really have any, but I can give you the name of the artist and you can contact, oh, that would be wonderful, So that was a lot of fun.
So they did some additional pressings on some of that stuff.
Oh yeah, as a matter of fact, exactly. Yeah, when we had to, they had to make another order and get some more pressings because they were selling it well in Europe.
Very cool. So and then you showed me some pictures earlier of the going from the 2-track to an 8-track machine, and then eventually to a digital hard drive recording.
Right.
And so what was the time span of that studio from the first block walls that you put holes in all the way up to that last digital?
We started putting the studio in about 1971 was when I set up the first table to put equipment on. And in 2004, we had grown to a complete 24-track all-digital studio with thousands of dollars worth of Neumann microphones and
You still doing bands in the 2000s on that?
Yes. Oh, absolutely.
24?
Yeah, we were doing bands back then, and we did kind of an interesting side note. A fellow by the name of Randy Carmichael, who was Hoagie Carmichael's son. Randy Carmichael was a jazz musician down in New Orleans, and when Katrina came through and destroyed everything, he wanted to help them all out, so he wanted to produce a CD that they could use to sell to raise money to help out the musicians in the area. So he was friends with a fellow by the name of Tommy Mullinex. Tommy Mullinex was a band leader, and we had done probably 4 or 5 different albums for Tommy by that time.
And this studio this time was called the Underground?
Yes, was called, yes.
See, I'd heard about that, but I don't think I ever visited you there. I just heard about it.
Right, it's called Down Under, actually, is what it was called.
Okay, all right.
Yeah, Down Under Studios. And so Tommy, well, like I said, we'd done several albums for Tommy Mullinex, and he told Larry Carmichael about this. So Larry came in. Was that his name? Larry? Randy Carmichael. Randy Carmichael came in to do this. Down in New Orleans was the name of it, and it was a song he had written, and he sang and played piano, and Tommy and his group backed him up with all local musicians, Dixieland, musicians, and they did this. And as a matter of fact, Channel 13 came over and videotaped the process, and put it on as a news segment. But yeah, it was a lot of fun and a good recording that we were able to, produce for them.
So what have you been doing since then? That's we've got 20 years to fill.
Yeah, well,
do it quickly.
During that same time, of course, I had a company called AVA Video Productions, and we have done everything you can imagine in the way of video production, everything from network news. We're a qualified production company for NBC, ABC, and CBS. We've done a lot of national news. We've done a lot of corporate videos. Corporate videos are really where the money is in video production, and you can make money in news, in broadcast news, but you work real hard for it. And the corporate videos are much easier to do, and you have a lot more time to do them. So, but that's kind of been the mainstay of what I've been doing.
Having worked in all these different areas of entertainment, what would be your advice to somebody maybe in college or coming out of college, wants to get into the industry, they're not sure what they want to do? They could come to you and ask you about half a dozen different different paths. What advice would you give them?
Well, the one thing that I would tell anyone who was coming to me and saying, "What do?" I would say, do what you love, because really that's the most important thing. Do what you're passionate about, because if you do that, the money will come. And then, and also the other part of it is to learn everything you can learn about what it is you want to do. Back when I started, we didn't have the internet, so I had to physically go out to the library had to go to bookstores.
Didn't have music production schools either, or
Exactly.
you know.
None of that stuff, was available. And even at IU, when I was taking radio and television, it was really more designed for writing television shows, not the actual physical work of putting something together. And that's really what I was interested in, was the technical side of putting something together. So, yeah, learn everything you can learn about what it is you're passionate about and what you want to do. And then
go do it.
And then take that knowledge and go out and do it.
Don't be afraid to ask questions.
Don't be afraid to ask questions. You're going to make mistakes. Trust me. But learn from those mistakes. And,
Very good.
Yeah.
Any other closing thoughts or highlights? Any other Phil Spector phone calls or anything like that you want to throw in there before we tie the rope?
I have written a couple articles for HD Video Pro magazine, and one of the articles I wrote was a story about a time we went to Chicago to shoot a commercial for a pool table company, and the pool table company, their motto was, "Our pool tables are so strong they'll support the weight of an elephant." Sounds like a good sales line.
Yeah.
So we went up there and we said, okay, I'm talking to the ad guy, and I said, okay, what are we going to do here? What do you have in mind? And he said, well, as a matter of fact, since their motto is our pool tables can't support the weight of an elephant, we're going to bring a live elephant in, put him on top of the pool table, and have you shoot that as our tag. Really? Oh yeah, it'll be great. So I said, okay. So we're in this showroom of this pool table manufacturer in Chicago. Beautiful showroom. All these beautiful pool tables around, and their top of the line is a rosewood pool table, rosewood sides and top and back, and beautiful slate top. And so he goes out and he says, okay. He says, we've got a truck outside, and it's got 3 different elephants in it. Large elephant, medium elephant, and a small elephant. And he said, what do you think, would be good? And I said, being a medium kind of guy, I said, let's bring in the medium elephant. And he said, okay, fine. So he goes and talks to the trainer. Trainer goes out to the truck, brings in a medium elephant. Through the double doors walks this elephant, live elephant. Comes over, he puts down one of those round things with a star on the top of it, so that the elephant can step up on it and get up onto the pool table. And so we have this, at the time was very expensive, $3,000 rosewood pool table, right? Sitting there. The elephant comes over, puts his one foot on top, and the trainer's hitting his other foot to get him to put it up onto the pool table to put his weight on it so he can jump up there. And the elephant puts his foot on it, and the legs on the pool table go like that. And we're all going, this is not going to go well. We can tell already. So I call out to the truck. This was the time when at National Teleproductions, when we had the truck with the recorders in it, the 2-inch video recorders. And I called out to the truck and I said, go ahead and roll a record on this.
Oh yeah.
Because we may get something really worthy. So we have the camera, pointing at the pool table and the elephant. And so the elephant puts his foot on it, and the trainer hits him on the rear end. So the elephant says, okay, here we go. And he puts all of his weight on it. And about 2 milliseconds later, we have $3,000 worth of rosewood toothpicks. And
that video exists somewhere.
Oh yes, absolutely exists. And the room went dead quiet. There was this enormous crash, and then the room went dead quiet because we have all of these agency people standing around, the owner of the pool table company, and all of his,
Time for a new motto.
Exactly. They're all standing around, and we don't know what to do. Because it was hilariously funny. Everybody's going, trying to stifle their laughs, and the president of the company, after about 10 seconds of complete silence, he starts laughing uproariously, You know, so then everybody goes, oh, oh yeah, okay. You know, everybody starts nervously laughing. So then they sweep all that up. They bring another $2,500 pool table in, and the trainer goes out and gets the small elephant. And actually, we ended up putting him on the small elephant on the pool table after the engineers from the pool table company had come in and wired the legs together with aircraft wire, aircraft cable.